Most people believe they control how they spend their time online,
Right.
but the truth is actually far more surprising. What if the very device you're holding right now isn't just a tool, but a hidden marketplace where your attention is the product? And what if it's literally, physically changing the shape of your brain?
I mean, it sounds like science fiction at first, but when you strip away the sleek interfaces and, just look at the raw neuroimaging data, the physical changes are undeniable.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have an incredibly thick stack of sources to go through today. I mean, we are pulling from academic EEG, brainwave studies, philosophical essays on the attention economy, insider interviews with tech whistleblowers, and even some very aggressive new legislation coming out of New York State and the EU.
Yeah, it's a massive topic.
It really is. And our mission today is to unpack exactly how our digital world has been engineered to hack our Paleolithic instincts. We're going to look at what it is literally doing to our gray matter and how society is, well, how we're finally waking up and fighting back.
And before we get into the heavy neuroscience, I want you, the listener, to just pause and think about the last time you lost an hour to doom scrolling.
Oh, man. Yesterday.
Right. You know the feeling. You pick up your phone just to chat one text message, and suddenly the sun is going down.
Yeah.
By the end of this conversation, you are going to understand exactly why that wasn't an accident, and more importantly, why it wasn't just a lack of willpower on your part.
That is such a relief to hear, honestly, because we tend to blame ourselves for that lost hour, like, I should have put the phone down. But according to our sources, the game is rigged from the start. I noticed a term popping up constantly in these research papers, surveillance capitalism. It sounds terrifying, but what does that actually mean in practice?
It's the foundational business model of the internet. It's a concept coined by Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff. For a long time, we've had this old school mentality that tech companies are just showing us ads.
Like digital billboards?
Yeah. Exactly, like digital billboards. But Zuboff's research shows that's a massive understatement. What they're actually doing is extracting what she calls behavioral surplus.
Behavioral surplus. So things we are doing beyond just clicking a link.
Far beyond. Think of it as your data exhaust.
Okay.
It's not just the posts you like. It's your physical location at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's how fast your thumb scrolls through a feed. It's the fraction of a second you hesitate before scrolling past an ex's photo.
Wow. Even the hesitation.
Even that, it's your emotional cues. Under surveillance capitalism, all of that raw, intimate human experience is claimed for free. They vacuum it up and feed it into massive machine intelligence processes to create prediction products.
So they aren't selling ads. They're selling certainty. They're fabricating a product that predicts what you'll do right now, what you'll buy tomorrow, and how you'll vote next year.
And those predictions are highly lucrative.
Yeah.
To really visualize how this extraction works in real time, there's a brilliant analogy from Tristan Harris. He's a former design ethicist at Google. He says, you need to imagine that whenever you pull out your phone to watch a video, you are simultaneously activating a supercomputer on the exact opposite side of the screen.
Okay.
And that supercomputer's entire job is to build a voodoo doll of you.
A voodoo doll. That is a deeply unsettling visual.
It's meant to be. The clothes on this digital voodoo doll, its personality, its fears, its vulnerabilities, they are all painstakingly constructed from your behavioral surplus. The supercomputer takes this doll and runs millions of simulations in the blink of an eye.
Just constantly testing it.
Constantly. It's testing out different pokes, different videos, notifications, or outrage-inducing headlines to figure out exactly which poke will keep the real you staring at the screen the longest.
And the supercomputer doesn't care if the poke makes me happy or miserable. Right? It just wants my eyes on the glass.
The machine has absolutely no concept of human well-being. It is a blind optimization engine. It only knows what metrics correlate with prolonged engagement.
Okay, so we're in this wildly uneven relationship. It's my tired, end-of-the-day human brain against a supercomputer whose only goal is to poke my specific vulnerabilities. This completely shatters the illusion of those terms of service agreements we all click without reading.
Oh, absolutely.
Which we're definitely going to get into because the legal argument there is fascinating. But before we touch the law, what are these digital pokes actually doing inside our heads? I know our sources go heavily into the physical brain.
The physical impact is where this gets very real. The platforms use a very old marketing framework called the ADA model that stands for attention, interest, desire, action.
Right, ADA.
Yeah. In the digital space, grabbing that first A, attention, is everything. And to hold it, these platforms deploy variable dopamine rewards.
You mean the slot machine effect.
Yeah.
I realized the other day I was standing in an elevator for maybe a 5-second ride, and my hand just automatically reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and swiped down on my feed. I didn't even consciously decide to do it.
That elevator moment is the perfect example of variable reward conditioning. The pull to refresh feature on your phone wasn't just a convenient design choice. It was deliberately modeled after the physical lever of a casino slot machine.
That's wild.
When you pull down and wait that agonizing split second while the wheel spins, you don't know if you're going to get a boring update from a coworker or a highly stimulating piece of social validation.
And that uncertainty is the hook.
Yes, that specific type of uncertainty triggers a massive release of dopamine in a part of your brain called the ventral striatum. That is the exact same reward circuitry that lights up when a gambler puts a coin in a slot machine.
But our sources go way deeper than just dopamine and psychology, don't they? We actually have hard data from electroencephalography EEG studies looking at the brain waves of people while they scroll. And the numbers here are staggering.
They really are. They paint a picture of severe cognitive exhaustion. Let's look at what happens when a user rapidly switches contexts.
Okay.
Imagine you're swiping through short-form videos. 1 second it's a cooking tutorial, the next it's a tragic news story, the next is a comedy sketch. EEG studies show that this rapid context switching causes a 40% spike in gamma wave activity.
Gamma waves are the ones associated with intense focus and high cognitive load, right? Like when you're taking a difficult math test.
Precisely. Gamma waves indicate heavy, intense processing. And when the voodoo doll algorithm successfully hits you with a high-reward video, that gamma power surges by 62%. Your brain is working in absolute overdrive to process the rapid-fire stimuli.
I always joke that my brain feels like a dial-up modem trying to load a 4K video after an hour on TikTok. It's just humming and overheating.
Yeah. That overheating feeling is measurable. Because while your gamma waves are spiking, your alpha waves are being severely suppressed. Alpha waves are the frequency of relaxation. It's the state your brain enters when you close your eyes or take a walk in nature.
So prolonged exposure to these feeds actively suppresses our biological ability to relax. It's like revving a car engine in the red zone for hours and never letting it idle. Something has to break.
And we see the breakage in the delta waves. The studies show that delta wave activity drastically increases after extended scrolling. Now, delta waves are slow brain waves normally associated with deep, restorative sleep.
Wait, so my brain is producing deep sleep waves while my eyes are wide open staring at a screen?
Yes. When delta spikes while you are awake, it strongly correlates with profound mental fatigue, brain fog, and digital burnout. Your brain is essentially trying to shut itself down to protect against the overwhelming cognitive load.
That perfectly explains that hollow, exhausted feeling you get when you finally put the phone down. But if this is happening to fully formed adult brains, what on earth is this doing to kids? Because their brains are still heavily under construction.
This is where the neuroimaging data becomes incredibly sobering. There are scoping reviews in our source stack looking specifically at children and adolescents ages 0 to 18.
And what do they find?
For heavy digital users, which researchers define as spending over 2 hours a day on these platforms, they are seeing actual physical reductions in gray and white matter volume.
We're literally talking about shrinking the brain.
In very specific vital areas, yes. They observed volume reduction in the orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC. This is the region tucked right behind your eyes, and it's heavily involved in impulse control and complex decision-making.
So the very part of the brain a teenager needs to say, I should put this phone away and do my homework, is being physically weakened by the phone itself.
A brutal irony. On top of that, researchers noted volume loss in the supplementary motor area, the SMA.
And what does that do?
That's a region that helps regulate physical movement. The hypothesis is that this reduction is linked simply to the repetitive, restrictive motor actions of clicking, swiping, and scrolling for hours on end instead of moving through the physical world.
Okay, let's pull back from the individual brain and look at what this means for us as a society. Because we've got algorithms running voodoo doll simulations to keep us hooked, our brains are flooded with gambling hormones, and our impulse control centers are physically shrinking. It feels like we're bringing a knife to a nuclear gunfight.
We are entirely outmatched. There's a brilliant quote in our sources from the sociobiologist E.O. Wilson that perfectly frames this crisis. He wrote, "We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology."
Paleolithic emotions, meaning deep down we are still wired for the African savanna. We have a desperate survival-level need for social validation. We are hyper-alert to danger, and we are fiercely tribal. And this godlike technology is plugging a fiber optic cable directly into those ancient vulnerabilities.
Because the algorithm doesn't care about truth, nuance, or societal stability. It only cares about the voodoo doll. And what is the easiest way to keep a Paleolithic brain engaged?
High arousal emotions.
Exactly. Outrage, fear, anger, and extreme novelty.
Right, algorithmic outrage.
Yeah.
The system actively prioritizes divisive content because it works. Our sources highlight a staggering statistic regarding this blind optimization. YouTube's algorithm recommended conspiracy videos from Alex Jones 15 billion times.
And it is crucial to state here that the researchers highlight this not to make a partisan point or take a political side.
Right, we aren't endorsing any viewpoint here.
No, this is presented purely as a documented, factual example of how an algorithm optimizes for engagement. The supercomputer didn't recommend those videos 15 billion times because it agreed with the content or had a political agenda. It recommended them because the behavioral surplus data proved that high arousal, conspiratorial content kept human eyeballs glued to the screen.
It's just cold math. But the tragic fallout of this hyper-engagement is what it's doing to our real-life relationships. We are supposedly more connected than at any point in human history, yet our sources point out a devastating statistic. Half of all Americans say they lack meaningful, daily face-to-face interactions.
The digital outrage machine is causing an atrophy of empathy. Constant exposure to global suffering, political anger, and heightened drama causes what psychologists call compassion fatigue. Our neurobiology simply isn't built to process the trauma of the entire world all at once.
You combine that empathy burnout with the slot machine mechanics we talked about earlier, and you get a generation in crisis. Teenagers are constantly measuring their self-worth against curated, filtered, impossible standards. It's no wonder we are seeing massive spikes in anxiety, depression, and social isolation. We've traded genuine human connection for superficial performance metrics.
It's a heavy trade.
It really is. So, this brings us to a massive curiosity loop I want to close from earlier. If we know this is happening, if the science shows it's shrinking our impulse control and driving us apart, why do we constantly click, I agree, on those terms of service contracts? If the deal is this toxic, why do we legally consent to it every single day?
To understand why the consent argument is flawed, we have to look at a philosophical framework proposed by researchers Brown and Watzel. They argue that we need to stop viewing the attention economy as a series of free services and start viewing it as a contested labor market.
A labor market. So we are the employees.
In a sense.
Yeah.
When you use a free digital service, you are trading a piece of your cognitive autonomy for access. You are exchanging your attention, your cognitive labor, for the ability to participate in modern society.
And Brown and Watzel had this incredible thought experiment to illustrate how unfair this trade is.
Yeah.
They call it the den. Imagine you walk into a physical room, the den, and to get access to whatever fun, social, or necessary thing is inside, you sign a contract at the door. But this contract gives the owner of the room total control over what you look at, what you listen to, and ultimately what you think about while you were inside.
Picture the walls covered in screens, perfectly calibrated to your deepest psychological vulnerabilities. Now, the tech companies will say, the door is unlocked, you can physically walk out of the den at any time. But Brown and Watzel point out that your freedom of thought is deeply compromised while you're inside.
It's like a casino you can't mentally leave.
The den is designed with such powerful, personalized distractions that deciding to leave requires immense cognitive effort. And remember the EEG data. That cognitive effort is exactly what the den is actively draining from you by suppressing your alpha waves and shrinking your impulse control. You've signed away a core piece of your autonomy just by entering.
Yet the tech platforms fall back on standard contract law. They say, hey, it's a free market. You clicked agree. It's a standard contract between two equal parties. Buyer beware.
Tristan Harris argues this is fundamentally the wrong legal and ethical framework. They pretend we are in an equal peer-to-peer contract, like buying a used car. But the asymmetry of power is astronomical. Harris argues that tech companies shouldn't be treated as equal parties. They should be regulated like doctors, lawyers, or therapists.
Tease of the legal concept of fiduciary duty. I found this part of the research fascinating.
It's a game changer. In law, a fiduciary relationship exists when one party has a massive asymmetry of knowledge and power over another. Think about a therapist. You share your deepest fears and vulnerabilities with them.
Right.
We have strict fiduciary laws preventing that therapist from turning around and selling your secrets to a third-party advertiser to manipulate you. Why? Because the power dynamic is incredibly uneven.
But these tech platforms know vastly more about us than any therapist ever could. A therapist gets an hour a week. The algorithm gets our micro-hesitations, our location data, our late-night search histories. They have the voodoo doll. Yet, under current contract law, they are legally allowed to exploit that massive asymmetry of power to maximize their own profits.
That is the core legal failure. Treating this as a simple "I agree" contract completely ignores the fact that the service itself is scientifically designed to undermine the user's rational decision-making capabilities.
Okay, let's pivot to some hope because this is getting heavy. We've diagnosed the disease. We are up against godlike supercomputers backed by a surveillance capitalism business model protected by medieval contract law, and our Paleolithic brains are exhausted. How do we actually fight back?
The resistance is starting with a movement called humane technology. The core idea is that we have to completely shift the incentive structures of the tech industry. We need to move away from extractive incentives, which treat human attention like a resource to be mined, and move toward regenerative incentives.
So designing technology that actually respects human frailties rather than actively exploiting them.
Creating digital environments that have ergonomic boundaries for our Paleolithic instincts. And the really exciting part is that lawmakers are finally stepping up to the plate. The law is trying to catch up to the technology.
We are seeing some truly aggressive legislation. Let's start at the federal level in the United States. Our sources detail the proposed SMART Act.
The Social Media Addiction Reduction Technology Act. What's revolutionary about this bill is that it doesn't just target content. It targets the psychological mechanics. The bill proposes an outright ban on infinite scroll and autoplay features.
It literally breaks the slot machine lever. And it goes even further, proposing an automatic daily use limit of 30 minutes by default. You could manually choose to stay on longer, but the platform would be legally required to implement hard, frictionless stopping points.
And while federal bills can move slowly, state levels are acting right now. New York has been incredibly aggressive. Governor Kathy Hochul recently signed legislation that essentially treats addictive social media feeds the same way we treat tobacco or high-sugar foods.
The Safe for Kids Act, S4505. It requires platforms that use algorithmic feeds to display stark warning labels to young users about the mental health impacts. It's bringing consumer protection directly into the digital space. But the obvious question is, how do you enforce that? Kids just lie about their birth year online all the time.
That's where the companion bill, Senate Bill 8102A, comes in. This pushes the responsibility away from the app and onto the manufacturers of the physical devices. It requires device-level age verification using an API.
Let's translate that for the non-developers listening. An API.
Think of an API as a secure digital bridge that lets two different software programs talk to each other. In this case, the bridge allows your physical smartphone to securely signal to Instagram or TikTok, "Hey, the verified owner of this device is a minor," which would automatically trigger all those legal protections without the kid having to input their age on every single app.
That is a massive shift in liability. And Europe is moving even faster than the US. The EU's Digital Services Act, or the DSA, has explicitly banned the use of what they call dark patterns.
Dark patterns are those manipulative user interface tricks.
Like when you try to cancel a subscription and the Keep My Subscription button is massive and bright green, but the cancel button is tiny gray text hidden at the very bottom of the page. It's designed to make opting out cognitively exhausting. The EU is making that illegal.
So the regulatory walls are definitely closing in, and you can tell the tech companies are feeling the heat because they are making small defensive shifts. For instance, Meta introduced a take a break feature on Instagram, which pops up and suggests you close the app after a certain amount of time.
But the internal documents in our sources show why they really did that, right?
Yes. Leaked documents revealed Meta developed that feature because their own internal EEG findings perfectly mirrored the academic research we discussed. Their own data showed users' alpha power dropping significantly below baseline, indicating severe cognitive fatigue.
But let's be real here. Take a break. Pop up on an app engineered by a supercomputer to be as addictive as a slot machine is just a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It still puts the ultimate burden of responsibility back on the user, whose impulse control has already been depleted by the app.
It's the illusion of a solution. Asking a fatigued Paleolithic brain to exercise willpower against a multi-billion-dollar prediction engine is not a systemic fix. A true solution requires fundamentally changing the underlying business model of surveillance capitalism so that user well-being and corporate profit are no longer inversely correlated.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've covered a staggering amount of ground today. We are navigating a reality where our attention is commodified. Our brains are literally being rewired by dopamine strolling, shrinking the very areas we need for impulse control. And our medieval institutions are desperately trying to regulate godlike technologies.
But as with any systemic challenge, awareness is your absolute best defense. The very first step to reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty is understanding the game. The next time you feel that phantom urge to pull to refresh in an elevator, or you find yourself 30 minutes deep into an infinite scroll, I want you to visualize that supercomputer.
Remember the voodoo doll?
Exactly. Recognize the massive asymmetry of power sitting in your pocket. You aren't lacking willpower. You are interacting with a system engineered to bypass your rational mind.
It's about taking that deep breath, recognizing the poke, and breaking the trance. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We've spent this entire time talking about how algorithms exploit our Paleolithic need for social validation to sell our attention to advertisers.
Right.
But what happens when artificial intelligence gets so incredibly advanced that it doesn't just harvest our attention with outrage, but perfectly simulates human intimacy? Are we prepared for a digital marketplace where our attention and our behavioral surplus are bought and sold, not by flashy banner ads, but by the AI companions we've genuinely grown to love, confide in, and trust?
Wow. That's a whole other level.
Something to think about the next time you pick up your phone.